And as always, reviews and comments are welcome on the show. Look for us on our social media handles or join news on TV, on Facebook, and on Twitter with the hashtag The Pulse. We'll be glad to share your thoughts with the rest of the world. Once again, you're welcome. Now, the outgoing NDC government has defended the approval of some contracts as its tenure comes to an end. Some members of the New Patriotic Party in the past have accused the Mahama administration of approving contracts even as they prepare to leave government. But government has hit back at its critics, saying the process of governance has not shut down with the end of the elections. Well, as governments and the NPP transition teams meet again today, members of the Mahama administration have assured that all outstanding handing over notes will be submitted today. Let's first hear from Hannah Tete. She speaks for the government side of the transition team.
I would also like to make known to ladies and gentlemen of the media that we have agreed within these discussions on a consultation mechanism by which we will engage each other if there are any issues that are arising out of the handover of these notes or any other matters that are pertaining to the transition. And should the need arise, we will invite you for briefing periodically. But it would be a briefing that is done and that is called at the behest of our two co-chairs, who would then make any information that they consider that is important to put in the public domain available to ladies and gentlemen of the media. So we've agreed a working framework. We've completed the handover of the notes, and at this point, the transition team now begins its work in earnest.
Well, after the handing over notes were submitted to the incoming administration, the spokesperson for the team, Kojo Ponkroma, had these words to share.
We have been assured that we will receive that one as soon as possible. The important thing is that right now we have 39 of it, except the Office of Government Machinery. We will be moving the 39 that we've received to the second stage while we wait for that exception that is coming through.
Forgive me, but how crucial is that particular one, the Office of Government Machinery?
It is a crucial one, as are many others. We are expecting to receive it in due course, and to also let the subcommittee that is working on the presidency go into that one as well, so that we can all get on the same page and prepare the necessary reports for the president-elect.
There are outstanding issues to do with appointment and also some form of contracts that are being signed. Last minute, people say, how were these issues resolved?
There was a very cordial and frank conversation about it, but the good news is that the transition team has agreed that without prejudice to the powers of the existing government to continue its work, things that are of major critical nature like recruitments, like contracts, where is required, will be done in consultation with the co-chairs of the transition team. So I am of the hope that the kind of decisions that have been made here today, if followed, will resolve the kind of challenges that threaten to rear their heads at that time.
And, okay, so the consultation will be at this particular level, as in the coaches having to confer on that. But would it be a consultation that can result in influencing the decision in any way?
They will consult. You would recall that at the inauguration of this committee, the president-elect and the president both mentioned that they want this job done in the interest of the country, not in the interest of the NDC or in the interest of the NPP, in the interest of the country. It is that same interest that will determine whatever decisions they make during those consultations.
I want to believe that argument that government is still in continuum, the tenure ends on the 6th of January, did not come up again.
Like I said, without prejudice to the powers of the existing government, whose powers will end on the 6th of January, and they have powers to still work, it is important that they consult the incoming administration. And a framework for that consultation has been agreed at the level of the co-chairs to the transition team, and they will work on it.
Do we know when the next meeting is supposed to be held?
We are currently perusing the documents we have received. The documents would determine for us when it's necessary for us to sit around the table for the second level of the transition. You know, the first level is the handing over of the documents. The second level is what I call the interrogatories, where, having briefed ourselves of it, we now engage our friends on the other side. I don't understand this. This doesn't reconcile with information I'm getting from the ground. Now, based on what we read and what we, may I say, acquaint ourselves with, then those subsequent meetings will take place.
So clearly what we know now is that a lot of discussions will continue beyond the handing over of the notes from government to the incoming administration that we've been able to already established. But remember that in the run-up to today's proceedings, there was a lot of talk about certain thorny issues that had become problematic for both the government and that of the NPP. And I'm talking about contracts which have been rumored to have been signed in the last few days or so. That's causing some trouble for the incoming administration. Let's hear from the Environment Minister, Mahama Ayariga, speaking to Raymond Akwa today at the transition team meeting today, discussing specifically issues to do with the certain waste management contract that the NPP thinks is being done the wrong way. Let's hear from him now.
You would want to push the incoming government into a tight corner where you sign last-minute contracts, which later on ends up being an albatross on its neck. What really are the details of this new contract?
Well, I think first and foremost, it will be good when we hear things to listen to the other side and have a fair sense of what it is that we are doing for our country. When I read it, the impression created is that I've gone to sign an 80 million euro contract to commit government, but that's not what it is. There's a new legislation, the Hazardous and Electronic Waste Management Act. Under that legislation, we try to put in place a system for the management of e-waste, that is used electronic equipment, like the ones that you see at Agbogulushi and all that. And under that act, the Minister for Environment is supposed to make arrangement for the establishment of electronic recycling, waste recycling plants. So what it is that somebody who has capacity to establish an electronic waste recycling plant approaches the minister and say, I want permission to establish an electronic waste recycling plant so that I can recycle electronic waste in Ghana. And where government is making provision to pay for those services, when I have my plant and I provide the service, then government will pay me. And then the minister is to provide a permit to the person to establish the recycling plant. Ordinarily, I would even think that you don't need to go to PPA for that kind of thing. But out of, being cautious and making sure that in future nobody raises an issue, before the elections, there was an application to me as minister, and I forwarded the application.
And this is in November specifically?
Yes. In fact, the matter started long before, just that because I was running around campaigning, I had no time to present it. But before the election, I submitted the application to the Public Procurement Authority. And it is simply this, that X company says they want to establish an electronic waste recycling plant. They are going to bear the cost of establishing their plant. They say that the plant costs 18 million euros. So kindly give them the permission to establish the waste recycling plant so that in future, when government of Ghana is procuring services for recycling of electronic waste, they will be one of the companies that will be eligible to provide the service. And then government then pays them like any cleaner in town, like Zoomlion provides services now.
Government of Ghana?
No, government of Ghana is not going to give them the 80 million euros. They are saying that the cost of establishing their plant is 18 million euros.
Okay.
It is at their expense.
But will we pay later on?
We are not paying them. We
We
are paying for the service of recycling electronic waste. And under the law, an administrator is to be appointed. It is that administrator who will determine that if you recycle 1 ton of waste, government of Ghana will pay you 10 cedis. Just as, for instance,
I think that's the main complaint about this particular deal is that it's something that's coming in way too late.
Why way too late? Do you know when the act was passed? The act was passed recently.
But this particular arrangement was
the act itself was passed recently. And I shepherded the act through Parliament, and it's my ambition to ensure that I live as a legacy a system for the effective management of e-waste. And I have up to the 6th of January 2017 to implement what I want to do. And I have from now till January 6, 2007 to make sure that I leave a legacy of an effective system for e-waste management in my country as a legacy and leave. So the question that we are trying to commit the government, you are not committing the government, you are helping a private company that has capacity to establish an e-waste system to go ahead and do so that when the new government comes in, you don't have to go through the trouble of finding somebody who can establish a recycling plant. There's already a recycling plant. All you need to do at that time is to determine that, okay, anybody who recycles 1 ton of waste will be paid 10 Ghana cedis. And the person will recycle the waste and then say, okay, I have recycled 20 tons and this is the bill. If you disagree, you determine how much you think is a fair amount to pay for the recycling of any volume of waste.
I get your point, and I think that's much more clarified.
Yeah, so the publications that they put out there, I mean, with all due respect, and there's a general point that people must know, and that is that this is a government, and this government has up to the 6th of January to do work that it has decided to do. And you need to go through the approvals of the various institutions. Parliament has enacted this act. So Parliament has vested in the minister responsibility to set up an electronic waste management system for Ghana.
That point you made.
Yes, and then yes.
Have you submitted your handover notes yet?
Yeah, we've submitted our handover. Our handover notes were written. I also hear stories that we haven't done our handover notes. Our handover notes were completed about a month ago.
Has it been submitted today?
It's been submitted. In fact, what happened was that after the elections, most people were reviewing to add work that has been done, you know, in addition and etc. But my recollection of my sector is that I handed over the notes to the Administrator General about a month ago. I mean, I signed it to be forwarded about a month ago.
I get your point. Today, do we know the number that's going to be submitted today?
I think all of them will be submitted today. All of them. I think all of them will be submitted today.
None to be left out?
I believe all of them will be submitted today. I believe.
Okay, beyond the submission of these handover notes, what's the other important issue you are likely to consider today?
Well, I mean, if you look at the presidential transition, the Transition Act, and let me caution you here, there's an agreement among us as members of the presidential transition team that we shouldn't speak except through our spokespersons. So I'm very reluctant to speak on matters relating to the transition because, you know, if you need any interview regarding the transition, you need to speak to the spokespersons on both sides. So I don't want to be seen, you know, undermining the agreement reached by the team that we only speak through our spokespersons. Yeah.
But the point is, I mean, I'm also understanding that there is some form of agreement as to consistent briefings, which will be through press conference from both sides. Has this been agreed upon?
Well, I mean, the spokespersons will handle that. They will have to decide how they're going to do their work. Ours is to come here, do whatever work we have to do. But I think that to help yourself, just look at the legislation. The legislation is quite clear on what needs to take place during a transition. So you could be guided.
So that's the Environment Minister, Mahama Yariga, speaking to my colleague Raymond Akwa today after the transition team from both sides met at the Accra International Conference Center. So what we do know is that once the handing over has been done of the notes, some perusal will have to be done by the incoming administration's transition team. Any questions they have as regards setting details in those notes, which they need clarity on, that will be the time when they will call on the team from the other side, that's from government, to come and lay bare the facts so clarity is brought to bear before the handing over is done on the 7th of January 2017.